It's baffled scholars for 2 millennia. It is a puzzle made of multi-dimensional elements, an enigma with roots that reach back to the dawning of time, perhaps before. Daniel explained part of it. Ezekiel and Isaiah had glimpses into it. John saw it all for the time of the end. That time is now. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert on a journey that spans the course of history, from Eden to Mount Hermon, from Hermon to Babel, from Babel to Rome, from Rome to the cross, and from there to us. Biblical prophecy is coming true before your eyes, and to understand it, you must discern the times both then and now. It's time to unravel the threads of this all-encompassing prophetic paradox. It's time to unravel Revelation.
Welcome to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we are delighted that you have chosen to join us once again here in our barn. There's a sleeping dog just the other side of the set. And in the house, Glory, we pray, is still sleeping.
Yes, the puppy and the adult dog have been wearing themselves out, which thankfully keeps us from having to wear them out. So we are grateful for that.
Yeah, we believe in training with love instead of the negative stuff. So we try to praise and reward and not praise. And I'll occasionally just get a little bit, I've
noticed that since Glory came into our lives just a couple of months ago, that the walks I was taking with Grace every day, where she would often get really excited and want to pull because she smelled something really. Now she's sort of like, okay, I'll walk at your pace.
She's tired.
She's tired.
She's tired.
She will often come out here. She comes out here to the barn with me to work.
Yeah, we say, you want to go to...
Yeah, and she knows immediately. She comes here, and we, while I do the 5 and 10 daily news analyses programs for Skywatch TV, she will often just be sleeping because she's trying to recover from the wrestling with the puppy.
Which is why she's sleeping right now. So yes, things are great here. We promised last week that we would discuss multiple names for one entity.
Yes, and this entity is one who's... He really intrigued me ever since we started pulling on the threads of the Rephaim. Who were the Rephaim? What's the connection in the ancient world? Come to discover that scholars have known all along that the Rephaim were well known to the neighbors of the ancient Israelites. Moses didn't invent them to demonize, pardon the pun, the Canaanites who were getting pushed out of the land. They were actually venerated by the Canaanites who were Amorite, and they found now, just within the last 20, 30 years, other archaeological finds that point to other Amorite kingdoms from northern Syria where the Rephaim were clearly part of the religious practices and the beliefs. The deification of the ancient kings, which is how they're described in Isaiah chapter 14.
And they had rituals in which you had to say the correct name.
Right. This was part of the monthly ritual, not just for the family gods. The family gods were the deceased ancestors who had to be summoned to a ritual meal once a month. For the dead kings of old, you had to do it twice a month, and they would often do this in mortuary gardens. I know that in the modern world, many of our cemeteries are called gardens.
That's a reflection of that.
It's a reflection of that, yeah, but we don't use them the same way. We don't go to place a wreath on the tomb of...
Intent.
We're not worshiping our deceased ancestors. But that was the case in the ancient world, and that's how the garden, this idea of a place to venerate the dead kings of old, the Rephaim, came into religious practice. In fact, the word garden in Hebrew has a cognate in the Amorite language, Ugaritic, which is equivalent to an ancient Persian word which means a ramparted or walled enclosure reserved for the king, which is what the Garden of Eden was. The fallen realm twisted that idea and turned the garden into a place where you'd venerate the dead kings.
And since
the Rephaim,
we're talking about the garden, one of the activities that Adam was given, one of the administrative activities, was to name all of the creatures, all of the animals. So the idea of giving a name to something is a powerful ability. And as the king's representative, Adam was made the steward of that garden. He was to sit on that throne and he gave it all up for whatever he ate. Some think it was an apple, some think there was a quince.
Pomegranate.
It may have been one of many, but whatever it was, he sinned. Naming all of the animals was powerful. Naming your ancestors, but also the deities that you're worshiping.
Right.
The name matters, and so there was this ancient ritual where you would call them by name to bring them to the location, the statuette or wherever, or the tree in some cases. We see also, and this is really important, Hashem.
The name.
We see it over and over again.
Yeah. This was used by the ancient, or it's used to this day. By Jews to replace the name Yahweh because they
consider it
too sacred to actually speak aloud. But the name theology, which we've touched on in this program in the past, actually means more than just the reputation. I mean, the Lord protects his name. It doesn't mean he's protecting his reputation. The name was in the angel of Yahweh. It is another aspect of God's physical presence. It was a person. It was it was a name, but it was a person, which is kind of hard for us to get around because we attach a set of attributes to the word name, just as we attach attributes to the three-letter word G-O-D, and we assume it's a proper name when it's not always.
Well, that entity whom we call Jesus Christ has a lot of names, and in the Old Testament we see a whole list. Yeah,
in Isaiah chapter 9, this is a really interesting prophecy, which I think we had kind of missed in Isaiah 9, the first couple of verses.
We've missed a lot over the years, I'm sure.
Is cited by Matthew in Matthew chapter 4, where he says that Jesus' his relocation from Nazareth to Capernaum was to fulfill the prophecy in Isaiah that those who walked in darkness have seen a great light, and those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them a light has shone. We've talked about that in previous programs, about how that related to the valley that the Jordan River runs through between Mount Hermon and the Sea of Galilee.
The valley
would suggest that is the valley of the shadow of death. But you go down a few verses to verse 6, and that's the prophecy of the coming Messiah. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. So multiple names or epithets. And
he'll have a brand new name written on his thigh when he returns.
Right. So when you're wondering about why a God in the ancient world, and again, this is one of the reasons I was so intrigued by this entity who led this rebellion in Genesis chapter 6, and who, according to Peter and Jude, he and his colleagues were cast down to Tartarus, just like the Titans of Greek and Roman mythology, started digging into researching that entity. Where did Shemihazah go? Why did he disappear from the Bible? Why did he disappear from history? He didn't. He's just got different names throughout history, different epithets throughout history.
Yes. The oldest one, what would you say the oldest one is?
Well, Shemihazah is the Hebrew version, but again, the book of 1st Enoch was only written in the 4th century BC.
Right.
So it was completed by about 300 BC.
Multiple names. Well, for instance,
the oldest
you're Derek.
Right.
You're also husband. You're also dad. You're also
brother.
Son. Son. Yeah. Exactly.
The oldest one that we can attest in writing, and it's possible that Shemihazah was transmitted verbally over the centuries. There are some who believe that Enoch wrote the book, but it was translated verbally and not written down until the 4th century BC. Maybe that's true, but we can't document it. The oldest known copy comes from the Upper Galilee around 300 BC. The oldest name we can attest is the Hurrian version. And the Hurrians were the Horites of the Bible. And this dates back to probably about 2400 BC from the city of Urkesh, which is the oldest urban center connected to the Hurrians that we know of.
Yeah, I'm so glad we stumbled across the reports of that.
You did. And when you put me onto it and I started pulling on those threads, the archaeology there really unlocked a lot of
the Ov and the King's Garden. Yeah.
Right. So Kumarbi, the Hurrian version of this entity, Enlil, El, Dagon, Molech, Milcom, That one we can attest back to about 2400 BC, but that city probably about 1,000 years older than that, and the ritual practices of the necromantic ritual pit, the Abi, which is the origin of the Sumerian word apsu, from which we get abyss, and the Hebrew word ov, translated as medium, but really means necromantic ritual pit. You know, think the medium of Endor summoning Samuel from the earth. That probably dates to about 3500 BC, and the people who settled it, the Hurrians, have been identified through a particular unique form of pottery to the Kura Araxes civilization, which are named for the two rivers on either side of the Caucasus Mountains in Armenia and Turkey, meaning they came from the plains of Ararat, below the mountain where Noah's Ark came to rest. They presumably, yes, they presumably took this practice from there and brought it with them to Urkesh, northern Syria, and then we know from that pottery that they settled in the region of the Sea of Galilee by about 2300 BC, which is about the time of Sargon the Great, maybe 400 or 500 years before the time of Abraham. So they brought that practice with them and probably brought it to Canaan with them.
Okay. Noah and his sons get off the ark. They remember the names from before the flood. They remember the activities. They remember the pagan rituals. Is it possible one or more of the sons began worshiping these entities, again, trying to call them back?
Yes, and I would argue that it was probably Ham, which would explain the curse of Canaan, I think, in part.
Oh, yes. Well, Ham, of course, who wanted to take over as king from his dad.
Right. That phrase in Genesis 9 where he saw his father's nakedness, that was a euphemism in the ancient world for incestuous relations with one's mother or stepmother. We don't know in that case.
So if it was just we'll assume it was just the one son, okay? So Ham and his descendants, because he had kids and they had kids and they had kids and they had kids, as they moved out and formed their own tribes, and even the other kids, the Japheth and Shem, their kids and their kids, because you don't know what your kids are going to do. Eventually, I think the descendants of all three sons began to worship and long for, gosh, it's really hard without those deities here.
Right.
And eventually you get the Babel event.
You get the Babel event when the languages are confused, the nations are divided, and this belief was spread to the entire world, and because people are speaking different languages, suddenly the same entity has got multiple different names.
Yes, and they may sound similar in the same way that the Romantic languages of Europe, all based on Latin, that they sound similar, but they've branched off and sort of been on their own and pronounced it differently.
And in the same way, the Semitic languages from the Assyrian, the Akkadian, the Eblaite, and the Canaanite or Ugaritic, similar to Hebrew, and how the discovery of those texts from these other parts of the ancient Near East have helped us to understand the Bible by giving us more context to some of the words in the Old Testament that may only have been used once or twice.
Let's take a break, because I want to talk about something that it may take a while to discuss and unpack. That's the bovid nature of these entities.
Okay, yes. What is it with the horns on these ancient gods, and how does it relate to our depiction of demons and devils? That's ahead on Unraveling Revelation. Summer reading season is just around the corner. We want to help you get ready.
You can buy fiction, you can buy nonfiction through the Gilbert House store, whichever you want. All of our books are 40% off. 40%.
That includes all 8 novels of the Red Wing saga.
Book 9 is coming, probably early summer.
My 2 novels, and then, of course, all of our nonfiction stuff, including our most recent books, Giants, Gods, and Dragons, The Second Coming of Saturn, and Veneration, a deep dive into the cult of the Nephilim.
April and May, you get 62 days.
Absolutely.
No, 61. April only has 30.
Regardless, through the end of May, 40% off on all of our books at the Gilbert House store, available only online. Go to gilberthouse.org/store. You'll find all the prices slashed on our books, 40% off, gilberthouse.org/store. And thank you for your prayers and support. Welcome back to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and guess what? Coffee.
Oh, we loves our coffee here in fact, I've got a coffee maker over there and cold coffee in the little refrigerator.
He's
over
all
there.
set. He doesn't even, well, there's no bathroom out here, so
That
you
is
have
true.
to come into the house.
Yeah, it keeps it's how I get my exercise, walking back and forth. But we partnered with Kevlar Joe's Coffee. This is a veteran-owned company, small. Nick Fisher is the man who hand roasts in small batches wonderful beans. It's all
they
organic.
are so good.
Yeah, and we've got 3 blends now. We're working on a 4th. We've got the Amazing Grace coffee, inspired by our wonderful flat-coated retriever Grace.
Cookies and cream.
Cookies and cream. Our late dachshund, Sam T. Dachshund, whom we miss terribly,
We really
inspired
do.
Snarling Dachshund, but that's a wonderfully smooth Sumatran blend. Boy, Sumatran is wonderful, wonderful.
I know,
breed.
and if Sam were here today, he would be ruling that house. Trust me.
Oh, and Sam loved coffee.
Oh, he really did.
He would finish up what was left
He
in the
did.
cup. Yeah.
Lori likes coffee.
Oh, really? Grace has never taken to it.
I know she hasn't
Interesting.
liked
And then there's the Dark Roast Colombian, Derek's Bunker Buster, inspired by the podcast of You from the Bunker, available on our
good.
app. So
We want to remind you, too, that we've got a sale. If you go to gilberthouse.org/store, you'll see the coffee.
Yep.
You'll also see our 75% off DVDs. That goes away March 31st.
right. But a discount on books, our books, fiction, nonfiction. Prepare for summer reading. Take advantage of 40% off that through the end of May. And we also want to remind you that we're just, well, actually, by the time this airs, we will have probably made a decision on
I
the.
know. You have until the end of March as well to decide whether or not you want to go to Israel with us for this solidarity tour.
Yeah. So we will make a decision on that by the end of March. Again, by the time this is airing, you probably will, the deadline will probably already have passed.
Yeah.
If you're interested and it's early in April, just get in touch with us, because if we're going, we'll always be happy to squeeze more people in.
We will. We're going next spring, so hey.
Yep. So information about where we are traveling, always available at our website, gilberthouse.org/travel.
It helps me to know where I am each day.
Yes. By the way, you can also keep up with our upcoming events as far as conferences, speaking engagements, and so forth at our app, our free app available at gilberthouse.org/app, unravelingrevelation.tv/app. There is a calendar section in there, and all of our upcoming events will always be kept up to date there. So,
Well, I want to talk about the horns.
okay. Tom, Joe?
Not the
No,
horn
I know.
family.
Horns.
Well, the bovid, the bovine, it means bull-like or bovid-like. You know, we all know bovines are cows. Cattle-like representation. Where did that come from?
That's a really good question. And I think there's a strong Amorite connection here, as well, as we've been talking about the sin, the iniquity of the Amorites over the last 6 weeks or so.
And Bull-El.
Bull-El and Kronos, whose name comes from the Semitic, and this may be counterintuitive, because for a long time scholars didn't want to believe that there was a Semitic or Hebrew influence on the gods of Greece and Rome, but there is. They got their religion from Mesopotamia. The name Kronos comes from the Semitic word qarnu, or karen, meaning horns. But taking it back even further, the other really, to me, this was jaw-dropping. And to me, I because I've always had kind of an interest in Greek mythology, and when you start digging into the Bible and realizing that these Elohim who were sent to the underworld, sent to the bottomless pit, to Tartarus, Peter specifically uses the word Tartarus. It's like, okay, that's a Greek term. Why is he using once in the Bible? And as our good friend, the late Dr. Michael Heiser used to say, if it's in the Bible and it's weird, it's probably important. Why did he identify Tartarus? That's where the Titans of the Greeks were located.
He could have said Hades, but he did not.
Right.
Because he was writing in Greek.
Yes, and he was writing under the influence of the Holy Spirit, so that word was chosen deliberately and inspired. So why identify the sons of God from Genesis 6 as the Titans of the Greeks? Then you start digging into the Amorite religion, and you realize that at the time of the Judges, in the neighboring Amorite culture.
The judges in
The judges in Israel, yeah. So we're talking about between 1400 and 1200, at about 1000 BC. So this kingdom, Ugarit, was destroyed around 1200 BC, and that's the date, the latest date on those texts. They were venerating a group of underworld spirits called the Tidanu. The Tidanu is apparently the name of a tribe of Amorites that we can attest in Mesopotamia going back to probably 2400 BC. They were a real thorn in the side of the Sumerians, who feared them to the point that they actually built a wall near modern Baghdad, about 175. Yes, they built a wall to make Sumer great again.
I'm laughing because of the name of the wall.
Yes, they literally named it the Amorite wall that keeps the Tidanu away.
Imagine us building a wall, the big wall to keep the immigrants away.
Yeah.
The illegal immigrants away.
They weren't worried about being politically correct back in ancient Sumer.
They weren't.
The problem for the Sumerians is that the wall didn't work.
No.
So the Tidanu came in, and then also a tribe called the Gutians, who came from the mountains of what is now Iran, and kind of overwhelmed Sumer around the year 2000 BC, about 200 years before Abraham. And this group, attested in Sumerian texts, they believe, according to scholars, and I was just rereading that last night, kind of forgot about it when we were talking about it previously, appear to have originated in the middle of Syria, a range of low mountains north of Palmyra called Jebel Bishri. Bishri is like an archaic form of Bashar, as in Bashar al-Assad. So a very common name both in Arabic and in the ancient Amorite. But there's a specific peak in this range of mountains, Jebel Bishri, called Jebel Didi, which appears to be etymologically the same as the Tidanu.
Oh,
now,
that's interesting.
In 1999, a scholar named Amar Anus wrote a paper called Were There Greek Rephaim? And he shows in this paper that the term used by the Greeks, the Greek poets Homer and Hesiod, for the men who lived during the Golden Age, the demigods who lived when Kronos ruled in heaven, the Golden Age, the term is moropes anthropoi. Anthropoi, anthropology, humans. Moropes derives from the same Semitic root as the word Rephaim. In other words, the Greeks knew who the Rephaim were. Their demigods, like Perseus and Herakles, were the Rephaim, the Nephilim of the Canaanites.
Thank you for saying that, because some people may not know that, even though we said it a number of times. You might be brand new. Rephaim, demons.
Demons.
The demons are the spirits of the drowned Nephilim. Their bodies died, but the spirits were set free.
And even Hesiod wrote that when the men of that age died, their spirits became daemons, which is where we get the word demons. It's just the Greeks and the Romans worshiping these spirits had a better opinion of them than Jews and Christians, who said, no, we know what those are. They're not good. They're not helpful, as Hesiod claimed. But here's the connection. In that same article, Anus wrote that the origin of the term Titan, for which there's never been an acceptable etymology, we think it means something like chalk or something. They don't know what it means. He showed that the word actually derives from the Amorite tribe, the Tidanu or the Tidanu, who were a physical tribe.
They worshipped these entities.
Right. In fact, there is in that Kispum ritual that we've talked about, that monthly ritual where the Amorites would summon their dead ancestors by name twice a month if they were dead kings of old, there was an ancient ancestor claimed by Hammurabi the Great, claimed by the kings of Ugarit, because they were all Amorites, named Ditana. And that name, apparently the what do they call it? The eponymous ancestor. They named the tribe for the ancestor. Ditana, Tidanu, Ditanu. They were a physical tribe in the time of the last Sumerian kingdom, destroyed around 2000 BC. By 800 years later, 1200 BC, the time of the judges, they were considered underworld spirits.
Yes.
And worshipped and venerated by the Amorites.
And by the way, the name Hammurabi
means Amu, my ancestors, Rabi, the Rephaim. My ancestors were the Rephaim.
He
My
was saying,
ancestors
I'm a big guy because I descend from these old world entities.
Yeah, and in studying this, I found that there were like 5, that we know of, 5 Amorite kings from Ugarit. The last king of Ugarit, by the way, was named Amorite III. So there were 2 others, but we know of at least 5 kings who took this name among the Amorites between the time of Hammurabi, who lived around 1790 to 1750 BC, and the time of the destruction of the Amorite kingdom at Ugarit. So it was a popular name. But again,
bovid.
The origin of the name Tidanu, so we're getting a long way around here. Tidanu comes from an Akkadian word that means ox or aurochs or bull.
Oh.
So when you get right down to it, what it means is the aurochs was an ancient strain of cattle that died out around the early 16th century. The bulls stood 6 foot at the shoulder. They're trying to recreate them through genetic breeding in Europe to try to rewild the megafauna of the forests of Europe.
Oh, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, but apparently that's what this meant. Bulls. And when you go back into Sumerian artwork and their iconography of their gods, you could always tell the deities by the ones that were wearing the horned caps.
Horns. And there were multiple horns. So when you see a prophecy that said it had 7 horns, start looking at the iconography and seeing if any of them have 8 horns or 7 horns or whatever the number is, because it's more than 2.
Yeah, and that's something that Doug Hamp put in his series, Corrupting the Image. He's got 3 volumes in that set, and he pointed out that this entity Enlil in Sumerian iconography is depicted as having that many sets of horns. So there are some strange connections there, but it also seems to go back to the description of the cherubim.
Yes, I wondered if you would bring that
The cherubim, yeah, who were human, ox, eagle, and lion.
Those 4 are in the heavens.
Right.
They're the cardinal points.
Right, but in Ezekiel 1, it's human, ox, eagle, lion. But in Ezekiel 10, it's human, cherub, eagle, lion. The cherub or cherub takes the place of the ox, suggesting that the bovid imagery is connected to the very nature of this entity.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'll tell you what. We promise on the next one we will continue this. We're running out of time, but I also want to get into, we've mentioned it before, but let's connect this again to Isaiah 14.
Isaiah 14 and the prophecy of the destruction of the king of Babylon, the Molech Babel, the king of Babel.
Yes.
Who again we think is this entity, Bul-El, Kronos, the horned one, who was Shemihazah of the book of 1 Enoch, the leader of the rebels in Genesis chapter 6, who emerges from the abyss in Revelation 9 as the destroyer, Abaddon or Apollyon. That's why we're spending so much time on this. Yes, Satan has a key role to play in the end times too, because he clearly is the leader of this rebellion. But this entity in the abyss, the bottomless pit, known to the Ammonites as Milcom, the Hebrews called him Molech, obviously still affects the world to this day, and looking forward to his chance, he thinks, to get out and reclaim his position. Thank you for watching. This is Unraveling Revelation.
Unraveling Revelation is a viewer-supported outreach of Gilbert House Ministries. Contact us through our websites or drop us a line at P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri, 65633.